United Nations was the idea of Ferdinand Roosevelt. There should be 4 policemen. India was offered a permanent seat twice, and that Jawaharlal Nehru didn't take it. Now, this impression is historically wrong. The military-industrial complex will not permit peace. The military-industrial complex wants war from time to time. As Prime Minister Modi has said, it is better to enter into negotiations today, yesterday, rather than tomorrow. Words have to be chosen carefully.
So what do you think about our Foreign Minister, Jaishankar?
He is good. At times, he makes statements which can cause problems. Just to get hold of 1 or 2 Hamas guys, they are prepared to kill any number of innocent civilians. And this is what I call genocide.
Even in the ongoing conflicts in Russia and Ukraine, the US has a massive role also.
President of the United States has the means and the responsibility to act when something wrong is happening.
In today's episode, we are honored to be joined by an incredibly insightful guest, Ambassador K.P. Fabian. With a career spanning over 3 decades in the Indian Foreign Services, Ambassador Fabian has seen the world's most pressing international challenges up close. From the tumult of Iranian Revolution to the complexities of multilateral diplomacy at United Nations. Today, he brings his wealth of experience to help us untangle some of the most critical issues in global politics. Together, we'll be exploring the roots and repercussions of global tensions, including the origins of the United Nations Security Council, the diplomatic challenges of the Cold War, and the pivotal choices that shaped the relationship between the US and the USSR. We'll also discuss the ongoing conflicts, from Israel and Palestine to Iran's complex regional influence, and what it means for India to navigate such a multipolar world. And finally, we'll get Ambassador Fabian's take on India's role as a neutralizing force amid the great power rivalries and rising tensions in places like Gaza and Ukraine. From the potential for World War III to India's evolving foreign policy. This conversation is packed with insights that couldn't be more timely. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I just wanted to take a quick moment. We looked at our analytics and noticed that 93% of you who watch our videos regularly aren't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying our content and want us to keep going with more insightful conversation, we'd really appreciate if you could take just a second to subscribe. It might seem like a small action, but it goes a long way in helping us grow and bringing even more amazing content your way. Thanks for your support. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video. While we were discussing, I thought the first question I should ask you about should be about India's place in the UN. How do you think India's power is in the UN at the moment, sir?
Well, India is doing well in terms of clout in the UN. But as you know, we have been wanting to reform the Security Council. And we merit to be a permanent member of the Security Council. But that has not happened. And to understand that, we have to go back a little bit into history.
What is the possibility? Like, what does a country need to be in the Security Council?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, what I say might be controversial. You know of the so-called G4, that is India, Germany, Japan, and Brazil. These 4 countries have formed the G4. And the G4 has been asking for a reform of the Security Council so that the number of permanent members is raised from now 5 to a higher figure. Because we also have to take into account Africa. 56 or 57 member states, more than 1 billion, human beings. Now, let me give you a little bit of background there. Years ago, probably 2004, 2005, at the time of the General Assembly, which meets in New York, September, it's meeting now, a meeting was held at the summit level between these four countries which are now G4 plus South Africa. And it was decided that they will form what is called a G5 and announce that to the world the next day by way of a press conference seeking reform of the Security Council to include the G5 as permanent members. So the press conference was arranged next day in the morning, but South Africa did not show up. Then a phone call came. South Africa said, sorry, unless there is a resolution by the OAU, African Union, saying that OAU designates South Africa as the permanent member, candidate, they don't want to get into it. In other words, they had second thoughts. That is why the G5 became G4.
G4.
Now, the problem with that G4 or G5 approach, let me put it this way. You see, you take Japan. China will never agree. And China has a veto power. You take Germany. Italy will never agree. I was ambassador in Italy.
Why is that?
I retired in 2000. I was there 97 to 2000.
But what's the issue with Italy?
No, the issue with Italy, this was not an issue with Italy at that time. But what was happening is that Italy had started the permanent representative, what is called a coffee clubs, open. So permanent representatives will come or their deputies. And the main point of discussion was to prevent Germany from becoming a permanent member, because Italy thinks Italy also is equally qualified. Now look at the contradiction. Imagine adding Germany and Italy. So how many from the small area called Western Europe?
4.
Okay. Look at their population. Look at the world population. Okay, now leave out Italy. Even Germany, that is 3 from Western Europe. Does it make sense?
Nope.
Okay. Now, Brazil. Well, some countries in Latin America, Argentina, or even Mexico may think, well, why not us? You know what I mean? So none of these G4 countries has support, endorsement from their region. Okay. Now, coming to India specific, it is true that, statements have been made by United States, by UK, France, and USSR, saying that India should be there. But, sometimes they make this statement because they want something from us. They want us to buy something from them. Things like that. But let's look at how is the charter changed? After all, the charter has to change. Charter says only these 5 are the permanent members. So articles of the charter have to change. Now, how do you change it? To change the charter, an amendment, you need to pass a resolution in the General Assembly, where, incidentally, there is no veto, but 2/3 majority. And after the resolution has been passed, it has to be ratified again by 2/3 of the member states, including the P5. In other words, if one of the P5 doesn't ratify it, process stops. Okay? Now, what I would have thought, a better way would have been, without announcing our candidature, or that of Japan, or that of Germany, or that of Brazil, India should have used the non-aligned global south and said, this structure of the Security Council, and let me at this point explain how the P5 came into being. You see, the United Nations was the idea of Ferdinand Roosevelt, FDR. So even before the war ended, he had thought of it, and his Secretary of State was drafting the charter. Now, it occurred to Roosevelt that when the war ends, there should be 4 policemen to keep law and order in the global village. So he thought of United States, USSR, United Kingdom, and China. Now, China was at that time led by Chiang Kai-shek. People's Republic of China came much later. We are talking about 43, 44.
Mm-hmm.
So, when this was, naturally he had to check with the UK and USSR. In fact, as we know, USA, USSR and UK, they were the big 3. They had their summit meetings. So Churchill was scandalized. China should be there. But he knew that he cannot make Roosevelt change his mind. So he said he would agree to China provided France is in. Mind you, France at that time was not even fully liberated. Roosevelt agreed. And when it came to Stalin, he was even more scandalized that China should be there. He said, an Asiatic power sitting in judgment over us, Europeans. But again, he also knew that he cannot make FDR change his mind. So he got other concessions in regard to the charter and other things. That is why he agreed. So this is the origin of
the Big Five.
P5 in 44, 45. Now how many years now? How many changes? Decolonization? So many other changes. So it is high time that the Security Council is reformed. It should have happened yesterday. So, and India merits to be in. So my view is that if we had done what we discussed, that is just get the General Assembly pass a resolution, and after it is passed and ratified, because P5 will find it very embarrassing to stand in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when it is time for the election to take place, India should announce its candidature. And India has a high standing. Whenever we get elected to either take a sock or anything else, we get more than the minimum required. We are among the first or second to be elected. You know what I mean? So that would have been the better way of seeking it. But anyway, let's see.
While we are the voice of the global south, sir, but China won't be on the consensus of having us.
No, that is precisely why I said don't ask for India to be in. India will be in when, after the ratification, General Assembly votes. And once the General Assembly votes, that's the end of it. There is no veto there. China can, use its diplomatic clout with others, don't vote for India. But nevertheless, India will get it. You see? So, there's no veto there.
So when do you speculate that India could be in the permanent member of the Security Council?
No, my point is that unless we change our strategy, we won't make it.
We won't make it. So while we're on the subject of the UN, we've been seeing a lot of conflicts around the world. We've been seeing Russia, Ukraine, Israel-Palestine, problems in Taiwan that could be looming as well. Why do we see a lot of talks about how UN's incapability in handling these conflicts are a major part? What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Okay. May I just go back for a second and try to clarify a general impression that India was offered a permanent seat twice and that Jawaharlal Nehru didn't take it. Now, this impression is historically wrong because what happened was that 1950 June, the Korean War started. And the Soviet Union started boycotting the UN meetings because China was not let in. 1949 October, PRC came into being. America did not recognize them. So, Taiwan or Republic of Formosa, Chiang Kai-shek, the little island, continued to sit on the Security Council as a permanent member. You see? Then, John Foster Dulles, he was Secretary of State. Well, my generation used to say, dull, duller, Dulles. The State Department approached Vijayalakshmi Pandit, Jawaharlal Nehru's sister, ambassador in Washington, saying that America wanted to support India's membership as a permanent member. And India can take China's place, you see. Now, Vijayalakshmi Pandit had no hesitation saying, thank you, but no. And she was right. Two things. One is that it is morally wrong for India to take China's position. But even more than that, it would not have worked out because it was not for the United States to offer it. Why? As I said earlier, the charter can be changed if only the P5 agrees. Now, if America proclaims India as a candidate, you can be sure the Soviet Union will not, I repeat, will not agree. So that was 1950. Okay? There was no real offer. Okay? Now in 1955, when Nehru went to Moscow, Bulganin said, why don't we now start a move for making India a permanent member? So Nehru said, yeah, that's a good idea, but this is not the best time. We'll think about it later. In fact, Nehru had a habit of dictating a note after every conversation, if the note taker was not present. So all this is in EMEA records. And even when Bulganin made it, he had not consulted the United States. You see, it's only when both Moscow and Washington agreed and together said, we want India to be there, then of course it was a proper offer. So there was no proper offer. Now coming back to what you said, the general impression that incompetent United Nations, just a talking shop, wasting time, employing so many people. No, that impression is wrong because United Nations is not, I repeat, an independent actor in the international realm. It is a forum for the member states to avail of, to discuss their differences, disputes, and come to an understanding for the resolution of those disputes and use the UN mechanism, whether it's Security Council or any other mechanism. You see?
So is this a platform for dialogue?
It's a platform for solving problems. But if you don't use it, and why? Because you as P5, look at all the wars. You see, the Korean War, for example. Well, it is believed that North Korea started it, But let me tell you, before North Korea started, there was a UN commission for Korea, and K.P.S. Menon, first Foreign Secretary of India. Incidentally, he was on the board of the UPSC when my interview took place. Okay. K.P.S. Menon was the head of that UN commission. And he had made out a plan for holding a general election for the whole of Korea so that both North and South will be united. Neither Washington nor Moscow wanted it. You see? And then election was held in South Korea, and America rigged the election so that a man called Syngman Rhee was made president. You see? And then the war started, 1950. Within less than a year, there was a military stalemate. But before that, let's see what happened. The North Koreans came down and South Korean military just got wiped out. So North was coming down, capital Seoul and all that, it came down, Then United States got MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur, general. He got into the act. And there was the so-called United Nations Army, but basically it was the United States Army. Okay? Others contributed. And with MacArthur coming, there was a reversal. MacArthur was moving up. And he crossed 38th parallel, dividing the two and going up. And he had made it clear that he wanted to go right up to the border with China. There is a border between China and North Korea. Around midnight, October 1950, Sardar K.M. Panikkar, Indian ambassador in Peking, we used to call it. Now we call it Beijing. He was summoned to the Foreign Office by Chu Enlai, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. Ambassador, please send an urgent message to Nehru. What is the message? Unless MacArthur stops and withdraws, goes back to the 38th parallel, PLA, People's Liberation Army, will enter the fray. So, those days we had the cipher, and somebody has to do it in the office. It was done at night, early hours, and our cipher also works 24/7. So, Nehru got the message. He passed on the message to both Truman and also to UK Prime Minister. Truman dismissed it. Well, here is this thin-blooded idealist who doesn't understand the ground realities of geopolitics, telling me. And Truman consulted MacArthur. You know what he said? Mr. President, the boys will be home for Christmas. Back home for Christmas. In other words, he would finish by Christmas time, December 1950. Well, 3 years later, after more than 3 million deaths later, after more than 45 or 50,000 American military deaths later, the ceasefire was on the same 38 parallel, slightly adjusted to North Korea's favor. So the point I'm making is that there was an opportunity to end that war. But Truman did not want to take it.
That's America's role everywhere nowadays as well.
Well, so my point is that, if America wants war, United Nations cannot stop it.
That's true. While we're talking about US, sir, even in the ongoing conflicts in Russia and Ukraine, and even Israel and Palestine also, the US has a massive role also.
Absolutely. In fact, since you mentioned Ukraine, let's go into it. You see, Henry Kissinger, he passed away recently. He had said Ukraine should be a bridge between Russia and the West. It should not be joining NATO.
Absolutely.
You see, because Russia will see it as a threat to its security. Because if American missiles are in Ukraine, they are a bit too close to Russia. But Zelensky wanted to join, and Biden encouraged him. Biden told the public that every country has its right to choose its defense policy. Russia cannot dictate. Now, what Biden said did not make any sense. I'll tell you why. October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. What happened? Soviet Union deployed missiles in Cuba. And what did Kennedy say? President Kennedy did not say, oh, Cuba has every right. Kennedy said, it's too close. Take them out. Now. Only thing is that generation, Kennedy and Khrushchev, they had the political maturity to discuss and diplomatically resolve the situation without going to the brink of a nuclear war, which would have, it would have been terrible. So many millions dying. You know what I mean? Now, what Putin is saying is the same thing. What Kennedy said at that time. Not too close to my border. You see? And Biden, incidentally, when Biden was elected, I had written an article saying that here is a man with the longest and the richest and the best foreign policy experience coming into the White House. So we can expect responsible leadership from the United States. But he has been a disappointment.
Hasn't reflected.
You see? So, when middle of November 2021, United States and Ukraine signed a strategic charter, and where it was said that United States will help Ukraine to recover all its territory, including Crimea. Well, when we have time, we'll go into Crimea later, including Crimea, which, as you know, was part of the Russian Federation. By the middle of December 2021, Putin sent 2 draft treaties one to Washington, the other to Brussels, NATO, seeking security guarantees for Russia. Now, instead of engaging in diplomatic negotiations, Biden publicly dismissed it, saying again, Ukraine has every right and NATO has every right to admit anyone it wants to. You see, that is why Putin was compelled. Again, I don't justify it. All the time saying that we should look at the big picture when something happens.
Was there a formal agreement after the breaking down of USSR that none of these Eastern European nations would be part of the NATO?
Well, before the USSR fell, when Gorbachev agreed to German unification, the Berlin Wall fell, 1989. When Gorbachev agreed to it, because they had a huge army present in East Germany, Soviet army. At that time, Gorbachev was assured by the United States there is no question of an eastward expansion of NATO. No formal agreement in writing. But the point is this was repeatedly assured. You see? Well, then the Soviet Union collapsed. There was Yeltsin there in Russia. And there was an opportunity then to fashion a European, pan-European security framework, inclusive of Russia, and even disband the NATO. But didn't happen. Why? Many reasons. Not enough imagination on the part of the political leadership. But even more than that, the military-industrial complex will not permit peace. The military-industrial complex wants war from time to time. Incidentally, you know that Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander in Europe, in his farewell address to his his compatriots, he warned them of the growing influence of the military-industrial complex and the need to reduce that influence. Now, what has happened is, what was then the military-industrial complex is now the military-industrial congressional complex. Because if you are a congressman, I, as arms manufacturer, will come and tell you, hey, I want this project to be approved, and I will fund your re-election. So it is a humongous military-industrial congressional complex. Very powerful. You see? So that is, because of this complex, one of the main reasons why at that time when the Soviet Union collapsed, Europe could have had a inclusive security cooperative framework. Russia would have agreed. And don't forget, Russia is, of course, diminished compared to Soviet Union. But nevertheless, there is a relationship of mutually assured destruction between Russia and the United States. Take that into account. You know what I mean? So Ukraine war need not have happened if Biden had stuck to what I call classical diplomacy. But instead, he has been practicing what is called public diplomacy. Well, public diplomacy can be virtuous or not. Virtuous public diplomacy means the government, especially in democracies, have an obligation to explain things to the public and even get their views. But that doesn't mean that you can talk about everything in public. That doesn't mean you cannot, that you need not conduct negotiations, diplomatic negotiations with discretion and confidentiality. You see? So Biden, and also, he has called Putin a murderer. And he has said something nasty about Xi Jinping also, publicly. See, my point is that when Biden said that Putin is a killer, I agree. But when I'm in office, I would never say that. As an IR commentator, I may now say it. Though even now I won't say it, because my point is that, we have to live in a... Yeah, it's a question of, getting along with people. By calling him killer, it doesn't change anything. It only makes things worse.
For the relationship,
So,
absolutely.
diplomacy is about using words carefully in the right context, not just being, talking through your hat.
So you're saying US always benefits from conflicts.
Pardon?
Are you trying to say that US always benefits from all these conflicts that happen?
Well, US wanted this war to occur, you see, and Putin fell for it, and he invaded on the 24th of February, 2022. How many months and you can calculate. Now, what's the situation? Very briefly, the military situation is in Russia's favor. There is going to be an aid fatigue. The West will find it difficult to go on giving aid, financial and military, to Ukraine. And now Zelensky has what he calls, quote, victory plan, unquote, quote unquote. He's going to New York. He has said that he will present it to Biden, to Kamala Harris, and to Trump. But what is it? The plan is to use Western weapons to strike deep into Russia. He did it in Kursk, you know that. Yeah, and it was celebrated. But what has happened is that he thought that by doing that, Putin will be compelled to redeploy his forces so that the military advance in other areas will be slowed down or even stop or can be reversed. It hasn't happened. You see? So, even if he starts, deep strikes, Putin, I am afraid, can he can threaten the use of nuclear weapon, mini nukes. He will not say that he will use it. All that he has to do is, the Ukrainian army now in position such and such, or Ukraine should stop these strikes within the next, announce that it will stop in the next 24 hours. Otherwise, consequences will follow. You don't have to use the N-word. Message is clear. And I don't think Biden will be prepared to risk San Francisco for the sake of Kiev. Nor would Schlotz like to risk Berlin for the sake of Kiev. So what I'm trying to say is that military advantages for Russia, and it is better, as India has said, as Prime Minister Modi has said, it is better to enter into negotiations today, yesterday, rather than tomorrow.
So do you think India has a role to be a mediator?
Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, there's a lot of talk of India being a mediator.
Because Russia named three nations, China, India, and Brazil.
Brazil. In fact, why did Putin say that? You see, there is going to be a BRICS summit next month, Kazan, 22nd, 24th October. He wants a declaration where there will be words favorable to Russia. And obviously, he needs India, Brazil, and China for that. That's point number one. Second point is, he is trying to tell Zelensky, you have been asking India to do this, do that. Now, don't think you can get much out of India. India is still with me.
Is India still with Russia?
No, I said that is the message he wants to give to Zelensky. Look at the declaration. You know what I mean? Well, India has taken a principled position. To say that India supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine is wrong, because India has not supported. You see, India has refused to condemn it. But let me also tell you, way back when I was Joint Secretary Gulf, Saddam Hussein had foolishly decided to have a picnic in Kuwait. Now, India did not join the West in condemning Saddam Hussein. Why? Because India wanted to talk to Saddam Hussein and see whether there is a diplomatic way out. Now, if I condemn you today, I cannot come and talk to you tomorrow. Words have to be chosen carefully. And I remember this was on the 2nd of August, 1990. That day there was a reception at the American Embassy. We had not joined the West. And the Indian media were practically assailing me. When are you going to condemn? Why haven't you condemned? So I had to explain to them calmly, we have no intention of condemning because we want to resolve this diplomatically. So if we condemn it publicly, it will not be possible for us to try to resolve it diplomatically. But the way our people imitated the Western media, the American line, how they mouthed it was, what shall I say, amusing. Let's leave Ukraine for the time being. Now come to Israel-Palestine.
Before that, sir, before we get there, since we're speaking about India and India's diplomacy in today's time, you have been someone who has closely understood a lot of diplomacy as well. So what do you think about our foreign minister, Jaishankar, at the moment? How is he performing?
He's good. But at the same time, at times he makes statements which can cause problems. Because you take Ukraine. There is a time, mind my words, there was a time when he used to say it was a European problem. It's a geography. It's a different geography.
Yes, I remember.
Okay? But now we are saying it is something which is, we are no longer saying it's a European problem. We are now saying we want to see this end because people are getting killed. And this has hurt the global south in many ways. Food prices, supply chains, and this and that. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that, instead of saying it was Europe's problem, we could have been a little more, what shall I say, taken a more global view.
No, but the Europe problem is correct because at that moment, the West was asking us to stop buying oil from Russia.
I know, but my point is that we could have said that we disagree. We cannot stop buying because we need oil. And where do you buy oil? From the cheapest market. Not because we support the war, but from the cheapest market. You see? And we could have also said, that a good part of the oil we buy goes back to Europe as refined products. So, what are you talking about? Now, only thing is that these matters, it is better to explain in private, instead of making statements. Because what happens is that, if I make a statement which is, uncomfortable for you, then you feel compelled to make another statement which makes me uncomfortable, then it's a tit for tat. Yeah. No, that is not diplomacy. Diplomacy is not hitting the headlines. I mean, sometimes we may need the headlines, but that is not. Diplomacy is about resolving problems.
With the optimal words, basically.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned from you, that you're saying that use the right words. You
Right
can't,
way and in the right context.
because any word can be hurting ourselves at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. So that is there, but otherwise he has been a very competent.
We spoke about US's role in it's basically a proxy war in Ukraine. Russia-Ukraine is a proxy war for the US.
In fact, I would say there are two wars. There's one war between Russia and Ukraine. There is another war between Russia and
the NATO. So similarly, US has a role in the Israel-Palestine issue as well.
Well, there it is like this. First of all, sometimes our media also speak of Israel-Hamas war between Israel and Hamas. Now, this is absolutely wrong.
Why is that, sir?
Because Israel is conducting a war not only against Hamas, it is conducting a war against Palestinians. Because against Palestinians. Let me explain. You see, they speak of, the Hamas, the Gaza Ministry of Health. It comes out with statistics about the number of people killed. I think the latest figure is about 40,000 or 41,000. Out of which more than 70% are women and children. Are they Hamas? Okay. Another thing is that Israel they suspect there is a Hamas guy hiding somewhere in that school, or that hospital, or that refugee camp, and then they bomb it. Just to get hold of one or two Hamas guys, they are prepared to kill any number of innocent civilians. So what Israel is doing is killing the Palestinians. And this is what I call genocide. You can look up Article 2 of the 1948 Convention. Let's look at the correct title. Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. That is the full title. Which means member states who have signed that convention have to do their utmost to prevent it, but if it has still occurred, you have to do your utmost to punish the crime. That is, those who are committing that crime. You see? So, what Israel is doing is genocide. And it's doing it in many ways. We told you about the bombing. Do you know that America has given them huge bombs? 1,000 ton. The capacity, that's how it is measured, you know what I mean? Not that it is physically 1,000 tons, but the explosives, Now, they have not given it to Ukraine even. Okay? So, and that is being used against civilians. See, let me put it this way. Let's look at ethics. I know ethics is not very fashionable. And some people believe that there is no relationship between politics and ethics. I beg to differ. We'll come into it later. If A is committing an offense, and if B has the means and the responsibility to stop A from to prevent him from committing it, or if he has started it, to stop him. And if B doesn't do it, then both A and B are morally responsible for the offense. Now, Netanyahu cannot conduct this war without American weapons. And Biden has been punching below his weight. It took him a long time to discover that civilians were being killed, because he went on repeating ad nauseum, Israel has every right to defend itself. You see? And then he started saying that Israel should respect, the IHL, that is International Humanitarian Law, and reduce or avoid civilian killings. But Netanyahu said, nothing doing. He has not changed anything. All that Biden has to do is to delay a couple of shipments. He's not doing it. He delayed one. Then Netanyahu put so much pressure. Then, other shipments went faster. Let me explain to you. 1982. Ariel Sharon, Israel. He was bombing Beirut. Civilians are getting killed. Reagan was the president. He told his Secretary of State, asked him to change it, stop it. He couldn't do it. So, Secretary of State was removed. New Secretary of State, he also couldn't do it. One day, Reagan said, get him on the phone, Israeli Prime Minister. He started by saying, stop the Holocaust. Holocaust is a very touchy word for the Jews. So he said, the Prime Minister was a Holocaust, his family had died in the Holocaust. You're telling me about the Holocaust? He said, yes, I mean it. You stop it. So the conversation was rather brief, 5 minutes plus or maximum 10 minutes. Do you know what happened? The Israeli cabinet met and they stopped the bombing. In other words, the point I'm making is that the President of the United States has the means and the responsibility to act when something wrong is happening. And if Biden is morally outraged that so many thousands of women and children and innocent men are killed, he should act. Otherwise, I would say there is a moral, bankruptcy. You see? So that is what is happening with Israel-Palestine, and there is the danger of a bigger war. Why?
Iran's involvement.
Yes, because Netanyahu wants a bigger war. Because there are corruption cases against him. You know that? Mm-hmm. And incidentally, you see, in the system there, if you are Prime Minister, then the cases cannot proceed. You see? So, he wanted to change the judicial system. Meaning, we all know Montesquieu, he had the theory of the separation of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. The three parts to the state. None should encroach into the realm of the other. That is a cardinal principle of all constitutions, including India's, America's, all constitutions. Now, Netanyahu wanted to change it, and there were huge demonstrations taking place, Okay, now, even this, the so-called 7th of October, let's call it 10-7, like 9/11, you see. Now, how did it happen? How come that the world-famous Israeli security system was caught napping? We don't know. There should be a proper investigation. In fact, the New York Times had carried a story, I don't know whether you saw it, a long report about the Jericho Wall. See, very briefly, junior officers in the intelligence system, Israel, had put up a dossier saying that Hamas is planning a big attack. And this is what they might do. And they were conducting drills. This is what they are going to do. Now, that was sort of more or less suppressed by the higher-ups, and no action was taken. That is why Israel was caught napping. And Netanyahu had withdrawn some units from the border between Gaza and Israel.
Some say Netanyahu funds Hamas as well.
Yeah, I'll come to that. Why did he have to withdraw? Because, his supporters, the far right, they were creating problems at the Temple Mount. The Israelis call it Temple Mount, and we all call it. But it's also Al-Aqsa Mosque and all that, sacred for the Muslims. Because the Prophet, blessed be his name, he's supposed to have gone to heaven on a horse and come back there. Beliefs. I may not believe that, but I respect their belief. You know what I mean? They have every right to believe. I respect that. Now, as you mentioned, that the Hamas did it, and I don't approve of it. What Hamas did on 7th of October, I don't approve it. It was terrorism. No doubt about it. In fact, Netanyahu has given a definition of terrorism way back. He says it is maiming or murdering or menacing innocent people for political ends. Good definition. Hamas did it on the 7th of October. But let me also tell you, the same definition applies to the Zionists, Haganah, Le Elieche, Irgun. These are the organizations which worked for Israel. By the same definition, they were also terrorists. In fact, when the British minister for the Middle East was murdered, the UK Prime Minister said, this is a terrorist act. You know what I mean? The Jews had done it. The Zionists had done it. So in the Middle East, there is also a precedent of using terrorism for, creating a state. I'm not approving of it. I'm just saying there is a precedent. Another thing we have to understand, let's ask the question, what if? Suppose Hamas had not done it on the 7th of October. What would have happened? Biden was going ahead with normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And earlier, under Trump, UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain had done it. Nobody was bothered about Palestine. Incidentally, when UAE said before signing, we expect Israel to freeze the settlements on the West Bank, Netanyahu said publicly, no, there is no such condition. And the UAE had to eat the humble pie and sign. So this would have gone on. And before that, at the GA, Netanyahu had unrolled a map showing Israel between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, all that was Israel. So Hamas had every reason to believe that they had to do something to stop this process. And the only thing they could have done was this. Again, I'm not justifying. I'm wanting all of us to look at the big picture. So that is why they did it. And now the normalization with Saudi Arabia is not happening. Abeyance, suspended. You see? So that is what it is. And now, of course, Biden vaguely speaks of two-state solution. He doesn't mean it. Because American approach is, after all, now let's get it right. We have an embassy, state of Palestine. You know that. And we treat it as a state. But essentially, it is only a municipality. Israel controls the airspace. Israel controls this maritime. Israel controls the land border. Israel controls everything. You know, it's euphemism to say the state of Palestine. But it is important to say that. In fact, if Biden is serious about a two-state solution, all that he has to do is to recognize the state of Palestine, recognized by 145 member states of the United Nations, including India, and say, border and other matters, let the state of Palestine and the state of Israel negotiate. Israeli tactic has been, we don't have anyone to negotiate with. Because you said that Netanyahu was supporting Hamas. Yes, he was doing it. But why? Because he wanted to project that the Palestinians are disunited. So there is no one we can talk to. That is why he was promoting Hamas. In fact, Qatar was funding Hamas for payment of salaries. And you know how that money was going? Dollars, real dollars in sacks, handed over to Israeli security. And Israeli security was giving it to Hamas. You know, now occasionally Israel says that Qatar is funding terrorism and all that. Absolute nonsense.
Iran is, though.
No, Iran is not supporting terrorism. Again, let's get it right. You see, we speak of, as I said, Hamas, as I said, it's a terrorist organization. But again, let's understand it. Hamas is partly a terrorist organization, but it has got a political wing. And it also has a development, NGO wing. Again, let's look at history. Muslim Brotherhood, founded in Egypt in 1923-24. You see? And it has so many daughters, including the one in Hamas, in Gaza. Hamas was founded in 1987 by people who differed with Yasser Arafat, who recognized the state of Israel without getting much in return. Because all that he got was that municipal status in West Bank and Gaza. And then the Oslo Accord said that, well, after negotiations, there will be a state of Palestine. But it was not serious. When was Oslo? 1993. How many years is it now? 30. Israel has been playing a game. And then don't forget, Netanyahu's party, the Likud, Likud party, its manifesto says, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, there is only the state of Israel. The Palestinians have to be thrown out, have to be got rid of. It doesn't matter whether they drown in the river or in the Mediterranean Sea, or they go to Egypt, or they go to Jordan. It doesn't matter. But they have to be got rid of.
Right.
With Netanyahu like that, Hamas had no choice.
Got it. So while we are on this subject, it is basically the incompetence of the US, which is being seen by
Not incompetence, irresponsibility.
responsibility and even incompetence in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Because, so the rest of the world sees this, and do you think that there's a change of perception of the superpower now, and it might shift, and countries like China, Russia, North Korea and Iran are gauging the situation and trying to manipulate the world order, one. And two, that will the US elections in November change any of these situations?
Well, it depends who comes in. If it is Kamala Harris, there will not be much change. She will continue basically with Biden policies, foreign policy. Internally, there may be changes that we don't know. If it is Trump, it will be a different story. Now, if it were Trump, because we don't know, a couple of things will happen. One is that the war in Ukraine will come to an end. Zelensky will have to surrender. Because once Trump says, even before he enters the White House, American aid will stop. If American aid will stop, then European aid will stop. In any case, even with American and European aid, it doesn't,
That's what Putin.
In other words, Ukraine, with all the support of NATO, cannot score a military victory over Russia. It's also true that Putin cannot score a complete military victory over Ukraine. It's also true. You see? But the point is, Putin has the advantage of having about 20% of the territory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they are Russian-speaking people also there. It's all complicated. You know what I mean? So that will stop.
That is why Putin is trying to manipulate.
Yeah. Now, as regards Palestine, Israel-Palestine, again, Hamas will have to surrender. Because with Trump there, Hamas will know that they have no chance. I mean, they can go on fighting, but it will be a different story because he will not like a prolonged war. So they will right and left. They are doing it already, but that will be, what shall I say, demoralization for Hamas.
So shifting the focus completely from the West to East to ourselves, India, sir. How do you think India's foreign policy is at the moment? While in PM Modi's first term, he focused on West Asia. In his second term, he was focusing on the in Europe and Western Europe. Now, third term, seems like he's focusing on the neighborhood, but he's not succeeding. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, let me put it this way. Neighborhood first policy was announced much earlier. We know that. And Look East was made into Act East. Now, these are all very good, headline catching. But, there has to be consequential action, diplomatic activity. Now, let's look at the neighbors. Our relations, starting with Maldives. We messed it up a little when the new president got elected. Because he had got elected on a platform which said India out. Now, the thing to do was to talk to him confidentially. Okay, you have said that. Now, we will replace our helicopters, the military helicopters, but a private Indian company will operate. And we also want to explain to you why you need us. After all, it's primarily for emergency healthcare. That includes foreign tourists. Now, you cannot take the foreign tourist who needs urgent attention to China, can you? Well, you can take them to Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka doesn't have enough capacity. So they have to come to India. So you also need it. But since you have made a promise, let's announce that India is withdrawing the military aircraft and Maldivian government has arranged for a private Indian company to continue the same service. So you can tell your electorate, hey, I have done this. Now, as regards other things, the shapes and all that, well, just say that we'll negotiate. Having demonstrated that you can get things done in one case, you don't have to do other things immediately. That can wait. So let's talk. Point number one. Point number two is that he was keen on making his first state visit to India. But our people didn't want it. They said, they couldn't find the dates. Then he went to Turkey, I think, and then he went to China. So China grabbed it, you see. But now, Maldives recognizes that
tourism is a bigger...
Not only tourism. Maldives cannot have a policy where it causes distance between Maldives and India and gets closer and closer to China. It is not possible for various reasons and so obvious, you see. So, were I a Maldivian diplomat, I will certainly have close relations with both India and China, but a shade closer with India, but done in such a way that China also assists me and I get from China what I want. Not sort of, you know what I mean? A little bit of non-alignment, but as I said, a shade closer to India for good geopolitical reasons. You see? Yeah. Anyway, now they are coming round and we are also, I think, we are expecting. So we have corrected, which is important because...
They realized that...
No, they realized and we also realized that it was a mistake on our part. And we are correcting ourselves also, which is good. After all, to err is human, but it's important to correct. All of us make mistakes. So that is good. Now, coming to Bangladesh, I'm afraid we are not doing it right. Because it was correct to have given asylum to Hasina when she asked for it. Okay. But keeping her here on an indefinite basis does not make much sense because there are already, I don't know how many.
Requests for extradition as well?
Well, not formal, not yet.
No.
Not yet formal, no formal. They said that they will request. No, they haven't said.
They haven't yet.
No, they haven't. Not formal. In fact, Yunus wanted to have a meeting with Prime Minister Modi. We have not yet agreed.
Declined it.
Well, we have not yet agreed. I mean, let me put it diplomatically. We have not yet agreed. So, they will ask for it. You see? And we have a treaty with them for extradition of criminals. Of course, there is a clause which says that not political asylum seekers. But the point is this. When do you say that it is political and not criminal? Because criminal cases are against her. I don't know how many, 60 or 80 or number is going on increasing. Murder. It's a criminal case. So obviously the extradition treaty should apply on the face of it. Now suppose we say no. Suppose that will affect our bilateral relations. And what we have to understand is, what we are witnessing in Bangladesh is a revolutionary situation. You know what I mean? A prime minister had to flee. Why? Because protesters were coming to her office or to her home. And the military said they were not prepared to shoot them down. The Bangladesh military said, Madam, we cannot protect you. And we give you, at some point, they said, we give you 45 minutes.
Who was to decide that? No.
The military said they will not shoot because protesters had planned to come. So if they come in large numbers, military said they won't shoot. What does that mean? If they don't shoot, then they will enter. Then what they will do, who can control? So she decided, after much persuasion by her son and by her sister, to get out. And she came, asked for asylum, and we gave it. Correct thing. But then we should have started a move to find her another place. You see? And publicly, of course, we should have said, it is for her to decide. She is always welcome. But privately, we should have told her, listen, we are going to find you another place. And we should have found a place. You know that UK has refused. US has cancelled a visa. And incidentally, Bangladesh has said that they have taken a decision to revoke her diplomatic passport. But again, it's a chess move. They have not yet revoked it. They have taken a decision to revoke it. You see, it's a chess move. Not yet revoked it. But one day they will revoke it. Then she will be without a passport, valid passport. Another thing, you see, we have 8% Hindu minority there. 8% of 170 million, you can calculate. 13, 14, something like that. Okay. Now, so many temples are there. Thousands of temples are there. See, the temples can be attacked by two sorts of people. One, extreme religious fanatics. You know what I mean? This is a Muslim Rashtra. So we cannot have a temple. Stop it. Violence. So they will do that. But that will be only a small number. And probably the Bangladesh government probably can do something about it. But there are other people who are inspired by ISI, Inter-Service Intelligence, and even by China, who want to spoil relations with India. And in order to spoil relations with India, they will attack temples. Not because they have anything against the temple. Now, if so many of them try to do it, the Bangladesh government will find it difficult to give protection. You know what I mean? They may mean to give protection, but they won't be able to. And if reports come of temples being attacked, there will be repercussions in India. So, it's a very difficult, inflammable situation. We have to act to bring down the tension, bring down the temperature before the explosion.
Such an insightful conversation I've had with you, sir. Diverse subjects, diverse perspective also, because I interact a lot on these same subjects with other people. But this kind of perspective I haven't gotten yet, sir.
Anyway, it's a question of having a conversation. And what shall I say? I try to explain the way I see it, but that's not the only way. There are many other ways of looking at it.
Using the right words is what I've learned from you today as well. So, since this podcast is called Diary of a Publisher, allow me to ask you two personal questions. One is, what is one book that you wish you would have read earlier in life? Any particular book that you hoped that in life I would have read this one earlier? would have changed your perspective?
I can't think of any particular book, but I have always believed when I chose the Foreign Service, after all, I could have chosen the IAS or the IPS or any other service. I'd always believed that the business of diplomacy is to resolve problems. And, the problems can be solved only when we speak confidentially. Now, during that confidential conversation, sometimes one may have to speak firmly, but always respectfully. Because by using abusive language, you don't gain anything. But you can make your position clear. I've done that. When I was in Canada, for example. You see, we had to send back somebody who was doing consular work. I had asked him to be sent back because there were complaints that from the ladies who were coming, he was trying to be sort of, take liberties with them. So I told the government, look, call him back. And they called him back. But then his wife remained there. And he was from the Sikh community. And Khalistan and this and that. She went to the Gurudwara and all that. And she applied for asylum. So I went to the Canadian Foreign Office. I said, I respect your rules because, they have to accept the application and go through it. They can't reject it just like that. So I respect your rules. But let me make it very clear. If you give her asylum, there will be repercussions on our bilateral relations. I had not consulted Delhi. No. I was very clear in my mind. And they didn't give her the asylum. And then we arranged for her to go back. So what I mean, you can make things clear.
With your stature, with how you speak.
But again, I said, I respect your rules about giving asylum. That you have to go through a process. I respect that. But let us understand this.
Is there any particular book that teaches you good diplomacy that you have read and you have learned a lot?
No, you'll have to read the memoirs of other diplomats, you know what I mean, who have solved problems. Say, even Maharaj Krishna Raskotra. You know Raskotra, yesterday we had at the India International Center celebrating his turning a century. His book, A Life in Diplomacy. It's available. It's worth reading. Yeah. There are books.
But my final question for you today is, so what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
To my younger self or to youngsters now?
The youngsters who are in a similar position as you.
Okay. What is required is, as I said, always look at the big picture. And to look at the big picture, we have to understand, and if I may say so, let's go back to Francis Bacon, who incidentally said, knowledge is power. Now, he said that to understand what is going on, you have to shatter 4 classes of idols and stop worshipping them. Okay? 4 classes. One is idols of the cave. That is, we as human beings, idols of the tribe. We as human beings believe there is more order in the world than there is. So many of us believe in astrology, as though the heavenly bodies are so concerned with us. Okay? Or for centuries in the West, they believed the earth was, the sun was going around the earth and all that. Earth was flat and this and that. You know what I mean? So, idols of the tribe. Then, idols of the cave, particular cave. For example, I mean, I have great respect for chartered accountants. But there are chartered accountants, a few of them, who, when they have to settle a personal account, they will go accurately. 33 lakh 47,831 rupees. Now, sometimes we don't have that 1 rupee or even 30 rupees. We just say, okay, but they want to be,
Right.
they want to be correct. So that is of the cave. Then idols for the marketplace. That is from the media and from what we listen to from others. We pick up things without thinking. Sometimes our newspapers say that India has overtaken China in economic GDP growth. But China is 4 times, 5 times our size. So even if they grow by X, and even if we grow at the rate of 3X, they are still growing faster. So what I mean, people don't think, but we pick up, So marketplace. And finally, idols of the theater. That is systems of philosophy. Euclidean geometry. Then non-Euclidean geometry came much later. Newtonian physics, Einsteinian relativity came much later. But till it came, nobody questioned, and we were all cocksure. Now, these are systems, huge systems, which we don't question. So you have to realize that these 4 classes of idols are there, especially in the world of social media.
Yes.
Incidentally, it is not at all social. It's quite antisocial. So we have to be aware. That is what youngsters have to do.
Shatter these glasses, what are you saying?
Yeah. But careful about it. And so whenever we read something or told something, respect that, but look at it critically.
Question it.
Apply your mind.
Question it, be curious, and just do your research. Bring in your...
And life is, we don't have time, vita brevis ars longa. Art is long, life is short. But still have a few areas of focus, and go into depth, discussing it among yourselves, or also ask somebody elder. But again, don't take what he or she says as the Bible. No. Combine.
Beautiful, sir. So, what an end to this conversation. Knowledge is power is what you said. Thank you so much for sparing the time, sir, for this insightful conversation. It was amazing for me, and I'm sure it's been for the audience as well, sir.
Well, I have enjoyed every moment, and let me say thank you to you.
Thank you so much, sir. We at TOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. Our production quality is going to get even better. And hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.